Welcome to Medicine Story Podcast. I am Chivito Koa, Little Goat Crow, facilitator of the Tree of Totems Spiritual Wilderness School and Cultural Community. In these podcasts, we adopt the indigenous and ancestral lens of walking the inner road, gathering around the virtual fireside where we decolonize our stories and reclaim the medicine we carry into this world. In our tradition, we like to begin with a form of beauty making, a kind of prayer, a kind of poem that allows us to really enter a very special heart and mind space that allows us to be more receptive to these hidden rememberings that are ready to stir within us. And when we gather around even the virtual council fire and we do it with sacred intent, what we're doing is we're crafting a space for the ancestors to actually enter in, and where these hidden teachings can actually find their way to us. As we say in a lot of my wilderness classes or rites of passage journeys, there's some teachings here that will only be available to you in the mountain, right? And this is what we call those unteachable learnings, right? That greet you from listening in that way that you're woven back into the mystery of it all. Now fill into these words, lean into the imagery. Let these words of this poem stir within you what is ready to come to the surface. It is called Ancestral Weavings, Remember, Remember. Quiet now. Quiet now. Your grandmother's mother is inviting you in. Here as the full belly moon glimmers on lake waters, she is inviting you into the ancestral hut of forgotten knowledge. She sings softly with her drum as you sit by the fire. In the cauldron, on the hearth fire, her apprentice stirs the stew of memories. The spell-cast enchantments of your aloneness are breaking. You are remembering where you come from now. Your father's father is inviting you in. Here on lake shores at the base of the mountain, just before the sun breaks open into the day. The birch bark canoe is ready with provisions. Still lake waters reflecting ancestral songlines of the sky people. He plays the flute prayers to the goddess dressing the dawn. Even now, you are remembering. The day holds gifts for you. Even now, you are remembering. You have gifts to give the day. There is a place in the desert, in the mountains, in the heart of the sea, in the holy place inside you where the veils of your aloneness fall away. Spell-cast enchantments fall away. Endangered knowledge awakens. The story of your true path becomes known to you. Even now, your grandmother's mother is inviting you in. Even now, your grandfather's father is preparing the canoe. Your blistered feet and your blistered heart from the life path you have walked thus far holds medicine and the sacred offerings you can now give to the goddess dressing the dawn. Even now, you already belong. Remember. Home. Just take a moment, let those words work inside you, their imagery, their power. It is said we're in a time of remembering. We're in a time of remembering. A time when many of us are reattuning our ear to the soul speech of the ground, and we're stirring the remembrances that are yet held in our bone memory. I was very fortunate to have lived and trained with my Babas in India for about 7 years. And these Babas were like holy men, sadhus, renunciates. They didn't own anything but the cloth that they wrapped around themselves. And they traveled mostly by foot. And one day I heard them share how they were some of the last of their lineage that had been passed down through the oral tradition for over 1,000 years. And I was shocked. I was so shocked to hear this. Like, how could it be 1,000+ year old lineage be about to disappear? And I asked, I'm like, well, what's going to happen when you're gone? Are you going to write it down, write whatever you can down? And they just smiled. And my Baba, smiling Baba, he said, no. He said, these teachings, they can't be written. You can only receive them through direct experience by way of listening. And I asked, well, does this mean that your lineage is going to now be lost? And Baba said, no. He said, these teachings, these understandings, they will never be lost. They merely go back down into the earth and they wait. They wait for a people who are ready to receive them, who has tuned their ear to a way of listening. Now, quite a few years after I left India for the last time, I was out in the red deserts of Utah and Arizona near Lake Powell, where I was guiding Vision Quest and wilderness rites of passage. And I met a Hopi elder there named Ben, who became one of my most beloved mentors. And he said the same thing with my Babas. He says, don't seek information, but rather seek out the experiences that tunes your ear to the sacred, and then the land will speak. It will reveal what I seek. He said all these teachings are held in the land, in the rivers, in the waters, in the plants, in that felt silence just before the sun breaks open into the day. And he said all these teachings live inside our bones. They're part of us, for we are part of the earth. Now, a common expression I have heard across multiple indigenous cultures and those who are still intact in that mythic way, they have this saying that says it's accessing your bone memory. Accessing your bone memory. This is what my Babas called remembering the original understandings. The Navajo call this the original instructions given to us by Creator. The Aborigine call these the original songlines. So what we're leaning into here is that inside each of us, there is a memory of what it is to be an extension of the earth and how to join in on this mythic experience of life, that it is our birthright, but also at some point, there is this acknowledgement that we've fallen out of our story. Something happened and we've forgotten. Now, Ben, this Hopi elder, he said to me, it was really beautiful. This is a healing moment for me when he said this. He said, we are all indigenous of earth. We are all indigenous of earth. It's just most have had their memories stolen from them in a way, from all these centuries of colonization and spiritual oppression, of how indigenous societies, have been displaced and forbidden to pass on their stories through the oral tradition that held these ancestral teachings. For that's how these teachings were passed on. And Ben said, if we are to survive as a people, then it's time for the people to begin to remember how we are all indigenous of Earth, to honor that which sustains us and become of that. From another lens, a Mayan elder, he shared, the indigenous mind knows that we owe it to the earth to become that part of the song that is missing, and that the earth wants to put the song back together. And if we can become the lost parts of the song, then we put the earth back together. We restore wholeness and health back into the people. Can really feel into that. There's a lot of beauty in that. Another kind of way of viewing and being of the world, and that's what we're referring to as this mythic indigenous perspective, right? So you can see we're actually in exciting times, for we're in these times of remembering. We're in a time when people are starting to become part of that song that's been missing. Right? Elders of many traditions are coming out of the woods, out of the deserts, out of the mountains, out of the cities, and they're giving this ancestral voice back to these remembrances that are, again, woven in our bone memory. So what we're speaking into is this mythic indigenous way of perceiving and being in the world, and how these remembrances are already a part of us. We can feel that when those words come, we have a felt sense of that in our bones, in our soul. And so we're making the shift. What we're doing is we're making that shift from this colonized, industrialized conditioning of seeking information to instead to begin to seek the stories, the songs, and the experiences, to seek the conversations, just like the one we're having now, that will stir these forgotten and endangered knowledge that is yet here in our bone marrow. And why this is important, again, is because when you can remember what part of the song your life holds, you restore your place in this greater mythic web of life. And you become whole, and you contribute to the healing of our broken world. Now, before we go further, it's important that we address a few words that I have already spoken and will continue to speak, because they're often abused, they're often appropriated. And so it's important to really honor these words. And that first word is indigenous. Like, what do we really mean by indigenous? Because we want to be really careful with that word, very deliberate, right? Now, as my mentor, Ben, the Hopi elder, he shared we want to decolonize our minds, and we want to re-indigenize our hearts, and to remember how we are all indigenous of Earth. But with that said, it's shared that, what we're not wanting to copy or mimic indigenous people, right? It's not about becoming Native American or Aborigine or reverting back to our European indigenous roots like in the old Celts, right? This isn't LARPing. It's not role playing. Right? Instead, the elders share, don't mimic us, but seek what the ancestors sought. Seek what the ancestors sought, which is relationship with the subtle, relationship with this mythic weave of life dreaming through us. So when I speak of indigenous, no, I'm referring to our original way of being in the world that puts us back into direct relationship with ourselves, the land, and with how nature expresses through us and stewards us, just like the rest of creation, right? It's referring to restoring our original relationship with this mythic experience of life. And we're going to go over what I mean by mythic in just a moment. See, when we go back to our pre-Christian roots, we see people of each land across Europe and the world connected to the land through specific myths, stories, and songs that wove them right into the landscape, that informed them of the temperamental nature of the energies of the seasons, of how to read the signs of the shifting of weather, how to read the signs to live in harmony and flow. So again, by indigenous, we're not referring to like Native American or Aborigine specifically, but to people who live connected to place and hold a mythic view of life as initiatory path, right? A common sense we're all being dreamt by the earth herself, right? It's a way of being in relationship. And why this is important is, to reconnect with this is because this mythic indigenous perspective is what weaves us into the greater meanings of our life. Without these perspectives, we enter a black and white flat world where we no longer have relationship with how nature is expressing through us, stewarding us, initiating us into these hidden gifts within. We become what the indigenous call soul loss. So instead of being part of nature and being in flow, we enter this mentality where we're meant to be these cogs on a machine wheel. And we're also always supposed to be in this perpetual state of affluence and abundance. And if we're not, then we go into this like self-depreciating loop of shaming ourselves, of thinking we're unworthy, that we can't measure up. We feel a sense of inadequacy, right? So you can see how without this mythic indigenous perspective, we adopt a very abusive psychology that actually pits us against ourselves and blocks us from this greater initiatory story that's being lived through you. Now, this next word is mythic. By mythic, we are acknowledging that the language of soul is through imagery, it's through symbols, it's through stories, it's through songs that give life to the deeper meanings of our experiences that can't be expressed in ordinary words, right? They can't be expressed through literal descriptions. And it's likely you are already having a felt experience of the depth and the importance of this mythic language or soul speech, right? From what I've already shared with you tonight, right? Just from that poem, our grandmother's mother is inviting you in, right? That ancestral hut of forgotten knowledge. Recognizing we're accessing our bone memory. That understanding that we are looking to become that part of the song that's missing, so to bring healing to the world and the people again. So you can see in that mythic language, that soul speech, right? You can see how ordinary speech, that literal speech, just can't express these depths. They almost prevent us, they block us from entering into this original story. Right? So you can see how this kind of mythic language, this soul speech, it weaves us back into the deeper meanings and movement of life that's felt. It restores our relationship with this mythic quality of life that our ancestors all lived a part of. And why this is important again is because our modern colonized world has adopted what the indigenous call flat speech that binds us and keeps us in a limited sense of self and the world, right? We've stripped away the soul speech and mythic perspective, and now we speak in a more literal black and white tongue. We now only see cause and effect. We can also call it resume speech, right? Which kind of strips down our life into a flat bullet point list of our success and failures, of where we were good or bad, how we fit into a desired role or projected image. So this flat, literal, colonized, even like Christian view traps us in a self-depreciating loop. Instead of seeing our gifts and our potential that has been gifted to us through our life journey, through our descents and our struggles, we instead view our life from a place of inadequacy and shame. And once that happens, we are taken out of relationship with nature and how these same principles that govern nature also govern us. And indigenous cultures have a word for us who have fallen out of our story with how we are indigenous of Earth, an extension of the land and nature. And it's called being soul loss. To be soul loss. So when we can decolonize our minds and our worldview, and we re-indigenize our hearts, as Ben, the Hopi elder, shares, and we begin to restore our sense of belonging with this greater mythic experience of life. We can look back on our lives and see our life path as an initiatory journey. We can see how we have always been part of nature, and how nature has always been expressing itself through us in these cycles of expanding and contracting, right? Just like the seasons contract into winter and expand back into summer, we can recognize we have our own hoop cycle. Your grandmother's mother is inviting you in. Your grandfather's father is preparing the canoe. Now, in this, we are recognizing that there are those sacred others who are yet here stewarding us. Like up till recently, acknowledging the ancestors and the other world and their guidance was a part of our life. Your blistered feet and your blistered heart from the life path you have walked thus far holds the medicine, holds the sacred offerings you can now gift to the goddess dressing the dawn. Right, here's this amazing ancestral awareness that when we struggle and when we suffer, when we have our descents in life, when we make mistakes, it was a good thing. Like the elders knew it was a good thing because it then instructed the elders how to mentor us, where our gifts are going to be. Because through our struggles, we often find those hidden strengths, hidden knowledge. And we go through that process, not just for ourselves, but because we can bring that back to the people, to the community. So this is a big shift from our modern colonized mindset, which says like, oh, well, you messed up there, you lost everything there, you made this mistake, blah, blah, blah. And it just compounds into this element of shame that just limits us. But from this ancestral mythic view, we're like, wow, no, life was initiating me. And what we're missing in today's world is that village culture where we have the elders and we have the mentors to see that and guide us through it, to craft these rites of passage so we can come in and confront our fears and our weaknesses and expand into those hidden strengths, and then be drummed back into our village, be drummed back and be seen that the one who went out of the village to confront is not the same who returned. That we found our part of the song that we get to put back. So you can see why it's important for us to shift our perspective, because it puts us back into our true story of how life is initiating you and how life is carefully crafted
to you're frozen. Pretty sure it's gonna come back on.
Okay. Again. Boom. Well, that truck was so loud, it just knocked my reception right out. So again, what we're filling into here is our stories have not only been kind of stolen from us through this colonized lens, but they've actually been manipulated in a way that they bind us into this self-defeating loop that reinforces often a sense of inadequacy, unworthiness, that disconnects us from nature. And we feel that we need to do it alone rather than through the togetherness. Right? But when we come back into this mythic indigenous perspective of life, oh, all right. Was I muted just a moment ago?
We
No,
couldn't hear you again.
you couldn't hear me before? Oh, weird.
No. Yeah, frozen. What Jessica says to everyone. Frozen. Frozen again. Come back.
Oh, can everyone hear me, see me? Am I alive?
You're
Okay,
live again. Yay.
thanks. I'm curious, when I was speaking before, was I muted? Okay, good. Just making sure.
No.
All right. So yeah, so basically to wrap up, we get to enter this place where we get to fall in with the mystery, to recognize how our experience of life, especially our times of descent and struggle, how there are ways that we get to cultivate relationship with the mystery. And those ancestors, they're dwelling here right on the periphery of our vision, and they're inviting us into these inner huts, to the deeper meanings of our life. And so we may ask, well, how do we actually begin to restore our soul speech? How do we begin to decolonize our minds and re-indigenize our connection to this mythic experience of life? How do we decolonize our own life stories and reclaim their mythic initiatory relationship with our own personal gifts, right? With the great mystery. And the answer is we want to seek out the stories, the songs, and the myths. We want to seek out the conversations that hold that caribou dust and that coyote fur in them, like this one and the dialogue we get to be in here in a minute. Like, review your life and look for how those moments in your life, those descents, those struggles were actually times of initiation that broke you open into your hidden gifts that you otherwise would never have matured into, right? Learn your stories, right? Learn your stories from this mythic initiatory lens so you can speak them with a kind of power that lets the world know that you have found that missing piece of the song and you're living it. And so you are there restoring that song of the earth. Boom. And that's the share for this evening. And I want to invite us all to enter into a reflective dialogue. I'm very curious how these words and this imagery, what did that conjure inside of you? What did that stir inside of you? What questions might you have? What might you be taking with you? Through our dialogues, we get to do that collaborative learning where we're all students. We all get to learn from each other's path.
I'll go, Chavito.
Please.
So For me, your poem was very vivid, very beautiful, visual, on that level. But on the more spiritual and mythical level, it just reinforced for me that importance of the village culture, sharing stories, really greeting our ancestors and thanking them for their wisdom, right, and their stories. And from those stories, we harvest the medicine that then we take forward that we can use to heal the past, the present, and the future, right? So for me, for instance, yeah, I don't like the word breaking some of those chains, but healing through my experiences presently actually heals my mother, my grandmother, and my great grandmother, myself in the present, but also future generations. So I think for me, it just reinforces the importance of gratitude, first of all, inviting the ancestors in and recognizing them on a daily basis, and allowing their stories to come through us and guide us, and then take that medicine and heal with it.
Beautiful, Lynn. Yeah, that's the heart of ancestral healing right there. Right. There's that acknowledgement that, you know, they walked that path and went through the things that they went through so that we can now be where we are, where we can be in a place of remembering. And how through colonization and the spiritual oppression for so long, like, you know, we've just forgotten. And there's a privilege now that we get to remember, we get to come into this speech. And I think it's important, like, for us to come into it in a good way, is to honor those who came before us and their sacrifices. You know, because when we look at that history, it's full of blood. It's full of a lot of grief, big wounds, big trauma. And so I think that's an important part as we move forward, is the honoring. You know, thank you for that, man. Yeah.
I'll speak.
Yes, please, Marie.
Hi, I have not joined in with any event circle like this before. So I just want to say thank you and appreciate being here. And this is maybe more concrete than what you were talking about, but in the poem, when you talked about our grandmother's grandmother or grandfather's father inviting us, I just had a physical feeling. I didn't know both my grandmother and grandfather on my dad's side passed before I was born. So I didn't know them, let alone their parents. And I'm taking a trip next month. I found out where they're buried, and I'm going to go meet them in that physical sense. Because I have nothing tangible that I sort of connect to with them. So I felt excited that I found their resting place, and I'm gonna go visit it. So when you said that, I thought, oh my gosh, it's like not only my grandparents, it's their grandparents. That I think I'm on the I think I'm supposed to be going. So
Oh,
anyway, thank you.
yeah. Thanks for that share, Maureen. I love it. Yes. Mm. That's just another way, like that mythic way of the ancestors and the speaking coming through us, and just that remembrance, that confirmation, right? We're not alone. You know? I think that's the greatest mind trick that we've been given, is that we are alone with those ancestors, both blood and other, that they're not walking with us. We forget. Every moment they're here to support us, and they're trying to speak to us in all these subtle ways, right? Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you.
Who else would like to contribute? Yes,
I'll
Helen.
go.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks for holding this circle tonight. Somehow it feels really clear and directed, to me.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm like the person who talked before. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. What?
Maureen.
Maureen?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I had kind of a sense of nostalgia, maybe, listening to the poem. From the very first sentence, talking about the mother of my grandmother, who I never knew, and the father of my grandfather. And it's not something that I was in relation with at all my life. It was only the people I knew because they were alive, because I interacted with them. But the invisible, the spirits, nothing like that. My dad's father, I never knew him, so it didn't exist for me, right? In some ways, I didn't relate to anything. So, and yeah, this nostalgia also, that there are so many things that, so many lessons I could have learned, maybe, if things had been different. But there's no regret, because I'm here, right now. So at least, my path is led me here. And yeah, I was reading something from Presto, and Martin Presto, and he says, it takes courage to be what the world needs, but the world never seems to change when you're alone.
Right.
And so that's where, these circles are so important. And so this relation with something, with, like you say, our bone memory, the mystery of our song, of our story. So I guess my questions would be, how do I practice that? How do I really practice it? I would say connect with it, but I feel, yeah, I don't have the answer. The first thing that comes to mind is I probably need to let go of a lot of stuff that encumber my mind, my life, but and let things happen.
The answer is really like it's a process, and it's about remembering how to be in relationship. Like when we look about how are we actually colonized in our mind, there's two main ways we see in our modern world, and that's through the colonized mind. We have this adversarial mindset where we need to conquer life, conquer our careers, we need to conquer our health. And the other is transactional, where we're asking, well, what am I going to get from this? But when we come back into this indigenous psychology, or you could call it an earth psychology, right, where instead of adversarial, we're like, well, how do I be in relationship with it? And when we say, well, cool, what does relationship mean? Like, how do you nourish relationship? How are you giving to relationship? How are you contributing? Right? There's this sense of an exchange that is occurring. And so when you're speaking either about ancestors or the rememberings, there's a sense of acknowledging that the remembrances are there. And in other terms, you might like, how do you court the remembrances? Like, how do you start to pull the thread? Like, let's go and invite them in. Like when we do ritual and we do ceremony, we do like special smells, we do certain offerings because that alerts the ancestors, right? The spirits that, hey, something sacred's going on. Someone is calling us. We either drum or like in India, we ring bells, someplace flutes. We, in the Norse tradition, we'd call eloquent speech, where, we speak in things of beauty. And so that invites them in, but then we also want to have a level of grief with us. And that grief lets the spirits know that we're serious, like we're sincere in our heart. And so it is about a relational way of coming in where we're tapping into what we call the river beneath the river. Like in today's world, we're right here on the surface and we're not quite sure how to get down there, but we want to get back down into those roots and start to connect, start to say, how do I contribute? How do I participate? When I was working with different native communities, especially down in the Southwest, like with Ben, man, I love Ben. He they would say is like, oh, we're about we're going to go do a sweat lodge this week, and I was like, I get all excited. I'm like, yeah, great. I'm like, but I would ask, I'm like, well, do you need any help collecting wood? They're like, no, we're good. I'm like, okay. And then next time, they would do it like every 2 weeks, and I would ask, I'm like, well, do you need more help getting any wood or anything? Can I bring you guys food? Could I support you? And they're like, no, we're good. Eventually, they would allow me to help gather wood, right? And then eventually they would allow me to help something else. And then when I was there, I would always have a little pouch of tobacco that was there. And anytime I was speaking with an elder, if I was there, I would put the tobacco on the counter or on the table so they would see it. And I would never ask them a direct question. Like direct questions are almost kind of rude. And so I'd have to think of a very creative way of asking the question. I'm like, I saw Vulture, twirling in the thermals one day, and it made me curious about this. And then if he was generous, he would start to share. And so there's this willingness to say, I'm willing to go the slow road. I'm willing to show up. And this is especially true for Native communities because so many people just appropriate. They just want something, that transactional mind. But when it comes to this mythic, we want to start asking, how can we court that which we seek? How do we be in relationship? How do we want to bring it in? And stirring the stories, honoring, like Maureen is doing, the sense of honoring the ancestors, calling it. Those are that ways we can begin. And so the other aspect of the decolonize our minds, we move from the adversarial where it's like, oh, I have to conquer something, and we go into this gifting culture. It's like, what can I contribute? So those are ways, and it's a slow process, but it's also fast in that fact that it will respond very immediately. Just don't think there's a place to get to. Helen, you wanted to share.
Yes. I just want to say hi to everyone, and it's really nice being in a circle with a group of people where the dialogue is so much real, more real than the everyday.
No.
The poem to me brought out the remembrance of the bones. I read a book in my early 20s from Clarissa Pinkola Estes.
Yeah.
And it really shook my world. It really opened up the doors of that our bones just seem, absorb everything through our lifespan. and everything that's occurred. And then it occurred to me that my mother's and my grandmother's, you know, it's all in my bones. Even though I wasn't old enough to remember them or even speak to some, because they'd passed before I was born, have this feeling like their stories are in my bones.
Yes.
And trying to get the feeling, it's more a feeling of different things coming out that didn't really match my day-to-day existence. So it made me question everything.
Oh.
So I really do feel a connection with that, and I'm in Australia, so I really do have a feel, whereas it's a young continent. So when I'm talking with people from America and from other places around the world, they have their ancestral histories, you know, written somewhere. Whereas mine only goes back so far. So it's sort of, I had these feelings of different things, and I went on a journey of looking through my ancestry and found that some came from Europe and come from all these different places. And then the light bulbs went on, because when reading about their culture and how they lived, they're the feelings, they're the pictures that I have in my head. So those memories are coming up through the bones, even though I'm not physically connected to any of it.
Right.
So my thing is, how can I get that conversation happening and make, I don't know, a difference for more information, you know?
Oh. Yeah. A good way of doing that is, like, if you know what your lineage is, you can think into to really court those ancestors, start having them speaking through, is like, you know, you might find out like what were their favorite foods, right? Like if there was any Irish descent or something, maybe you should put a little thing of whiskey out there, you know?
Yeah.
There's the element of creating that space that's going to entice them and says, hey, I'm making this for you. And in fact, a lot of different cultures have where they create a feast for the dead. They create the feast for the ancestors. And there's a beautiful ceremony around it. And you can maybe even research that. But just starting to, again, you're courting them to come in and begin to speak, saying, hey, I'm now receptive. I'm curious. And the way they speak are very subtle ways. Like, you know, across, you know, cultures, there's the element of animals showing up, you know, whether it's European or Australian, Native American. Here we call them totems, but they have certain significances, or there might be certain things that show up, and then that'll tie you to another story, right? And so there's this sense where you got to pull the thread. You're trailing them, and what you're doing, you're trailing them home, and it's a beautiful journey to savor and relish and enjoy the unraveling. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Well.
I will share
Please,
something.
Jessica.
I wanted to speak to the initiation that you were talking about and the blisters, right? From the paths we've been walking. So I pray to my ancestors almost every night because I know that they know that the battles I'm facing are worldly battles. They're from my culture. They're not real, right? Like they're not who I am. They're not who my spirit is. They're not like who we are as people. It's, you know, all the trauma and all the, you know, commercialization of me hating myself, right? And the people that make money off of that. And I know that my ancestors know that. so I'm always asking for help to please like see past that and get through this. And so yeah, I'm just always like, because I know that like past the veil, like this isn't what our spirits are worrying about, right? So I'm just constantly seeking guidance through that. And I really did love what you talked about with life initiating us, because I am going through some battles, and I've talked about that a couple of times in these meetings. I mean, I turned 40 this year, and the universe or life or my ancestors knew it was time to break all of my, like, break my shell open, the things I've been doing, the way I've been treating myself, the way I've been allowing others to treat me, again, from just programming. It's time to stop. It's time to do things differently. And that's what I've been doing for really like almost 2 years. And I'm still doing it. And every month is different. But I love, like, it's so grounding to remind myself that, and I know it's for a purpose. I know everything that's happening is really just to get, for love, and to help me love others and help me heal others and heal myself and love myself. But it's just such a great reminder that, like, I'm right where I need to be. And this is a gift. This is a huge gift. And I love what you said about slowing down, because when I do pray, I pray like, please let this be over. Please. I keep saying to my friends, like, I need it to be next year. I need this to be done. And I'm going to practice with intention, slowing down and going the slow road, you said. And I appreciate that, because I have been like, when is this over? When is this over? When can I have just gotten everything I need and stop doing this? Which probably isn't realistic, but it's just a good reminder. So I just really appreciate, I loved the home and I loved everything in it. And I love this space.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, my mantra for the last few years, which has been very painful, is slow the process down. Slow the process down. And every time I think I enter a new layer to get to slow it down. And it's a bit torturous, because I also have that colonized mind. I'm like, all right, let's get it going. Let's bloom. Let's bring this forward. And Spirit's like, well, why don't you go cultivate a little relationships over here, or go water that plant. I'm like, okay. But I have found that through that slowing the process down, how much richer my life becomes. Like, it reminds me of this is a little bit different, but there's this element where the Inuits in Alaska, they share, like, a lot of people try to be in the moon palace, and they try to be up distant away from everything. They can see it all happening, but they're not touched by life. And they say, well, the path back to Earth is a 3-day journey downward. And that's a descent back into relatedness. And so we've been fooled in this almost idea that the idea of enlightenment is ascension, when it's actually descension, because we're coming back into the remembrance how we get to be a part of the stories. And through our grief and through our trials, that's what brings us into togetherness. And that's actually what we're seeking. And so rather than moving out, saying, how do we get to, it's actually I think an old Hopi prayer quote, you might all know it, but there's a part of it that says, there'll be people who are in the river, and they'll be holding to the sides of that river, and they'll feel as if they're being torn apart. The elders share, let go of the roots, let go of the side, swim to the center, keep your head above the water and look around and see who is there with you, and celebrate. Celebrate who's in the waters with you. As they say, in this day and age, we can't take anything seriously, least of all ourselves. Instead, do everything in a sacred manner. And I've heard that poem so many times. It was the first prayers I've heard that just became something like it activated. That's that bone memory. And yeah, but I totally get. I'm like, can this just be over? Can we just all celebrate?
I love that, though. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm working with that myself. Cool.
All right, I want to share too.
Please, Ute.
Yeah. One thing, I love that poem, and especially bone memory. Bone memory, and all the sharing before me reminded me of my childhood when I was with my grandma and I spent all my vacations. My grandma was in Germany, was different. Not 3 months. Was well, here 6 weeks, there 2, another 1, another 2, and so the 6 weeks we had in summer vacation. I remember me and my sister, who's younger than me, we were sneaking in the morning to my grandma's bed and go like, "Tell us a story. Tell us a story." I can personally right now, I cannot recall any, and I know they're there. They're in the bone memory. So that is pretty. I'm like, wow, thank you for the gift of all you sharing, triggering, or so I can find my stories there. And then, yes, that is that. There was something else I wanted to share. Well, that is gone away right now. So yeah, that was when I was pretty young, and then actually, I'm not sure how old we were until we just grandma wasn't there anymore for us to. And I'm excited to actually now engage in September, starting September, engage with 3 to 6 year olds to to literally be with them while they're discovering the wild, and then they supporting them in any way, and I'm gonna be listening very keenly for what's going on, what stories are there, what they're remembering, and so I'm really excited about that part too.
Mm.
Mhm. Mm.
Mm. Love it,
Mhm.
Ute. Oh, excited for you playing with the young ones too, and what they're going to initiate you into through their beautiful, playful nature.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, I have wanted to share something else, and that's gone right now, which is gone. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Mhm.
All right. Great. Would anyone else like to contribute into the circle? What you're taking with you, what got stirred inside?
Oh, yeah, I remember something. I'm not sure if that's new or not for me. Not, I mean, was the thing I wanted to share. And when I'm out in nature and addressing the tree people, for example, and the ancestors that are there, over these past 2 years, my level of oneness with everything has grown. With every time I'm doing this, right, like being out there relating, there's no more loneliness. It's like really being related with everything and the ancestors. It is there, and that's more. Mhm.
Thank you for that, Ute. Yeah, I think one of the most common expressions I hear from people is how so many feel orphaned in the world. They have their family, but they feel spiritually orphaned. Like, where are my real roots? Where do I come from? And the 13 grandmothers, they speak into this. They speak how when we are disconnected from the earth and from nature, that we become kind of unrooted, we become orphaned, and we lose that sense of identity with self. And it's amazing how, if you really think about it, it's like it's all been a trick. It's just been this, basically we think of it as being spell cast. These spells that we cast, as Martin Shaw says, like, bad storytelling casts spells, right? Good storytelling breaks spells. And so what we're doing here is we are reclaiming our stories. That weaves us back into the originality of it all. And that's why it's important for us to remember. Yeah. Cool.
I just wanted to add to Vito the image of letting go of the root, letting go of the side of the river, and allowing yourself to flow head above water, and looking around and celebrating. That was such a beautiful vision for me, and it really reminded me of the importance of being in the moment and flowing, right? Really flowing. And I know that's kind of a cliche, but really, when you do flow like that, you've let go of a lot of resistance, right? And you really trust that that river is going to take you where you need to go. And so let's enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
And look around and see the people who are riding with us and celebrate. Yeah, we need to celebrate more.
Oh. I agree, Lynn. Thank you so much. Yeah, I consistently need that reminder as well. Well, wonderful, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us in Circle this evening. I'm hoping we're going to have a very special elder in our next wisdom talk, who is, to me, he's like really the epitome of the inspired elder. And he's been working with medicine drums for a long time. And I'm just still confirming that he's available for that date. But if he's available, his name's Patrick. And he is full on coyote medicine. So get ready for a lot of laughter and play and trickery. And I'm excited. I'm always a little intimidated with him and always extremely excited. So yeah. And then if any of you have further questions about how do you dive into your own mythic indigenous lens, how do you start to see your life from that initiatory path, please reach out to me. This is what I do. I love it. I'm passionate about it. And I just want to help restore these. And because you feel like the healing, right? It's like we want to find the missing parts of the song. And there's a saying like, we all come into this world with a song, and you are that song. And our task is to remember that song, and that's how we restore the song of the world. And so we're finally in a time we can begin to remember. So if you feel called, just reach out to me. I also would love to hear any other reflections that you might have that you want to share. In the meantime, hopefully I see you next Sunday, and happy travels. Does everyone feel good? Feel complete? Yeah. So the way we like to end this, though, we like to have a little fun, and we unmute ourselves, and we want to do some wolf howls or raven caws or duck quacks. Wait for everyone to unmute themselves. Yeah. All right. I love it. All right, everyone. Have a good night. Thanks for joining. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Medicine Story Podcast. If you wish to explore our upcoming gatherings, offerings, and cultural community, you can visit us at treeoftotems.com. Once again, I am Chivito Koa, Little Goat Crow. Thank you for gathering with me today. Om.